Welcome to UNCAGED, the show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Clare Robinson. Hey, Clare, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Hey, Ben, really well.
Well, Clare is on the other side of the world from me. I'm in New York today. She's in Sydney. She is the founder and head coach at Clarety Coaching and Consulting. They work and partner with leaders and their organizations to enable them to develop workplaces where their people can thrive. We'll talk about what she's doing, what executive coaching, what making people smarter leaders, making them more, as she states, more luminous looks like, and really how that's changing the shape of business today. Clare, it's great to have you here. But before we get started, tell me a little bit about you and your career.
Ben, I'm so grateful to be here and for you taking the time to talk to me today. As you mentioned, I'm in Sydney town, so on the other side of the world from you today. But I actually grew up on the other side of the world in the UK. So yeah, I've been in Sydney for the last, 15 years, which seems kind of crazy. But yeah, I'm originally from the UK, from a very small town in the north of England. And, you know, sort of dreamed of the bright lights in the big city and kind of worked my way to London, which was where I kind of started my first career, which we were just having a chat about, in advertising. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But actually, if I reflect, I did have a career in my teens, which as a tennis coach back in the day. And it's so strange to me that, you know, I was deeply passionate about sports, although I had teachers as parents. And so education was the thing. But at quite a young age, I kind of found a real love for coaching. And then, as I think we all do, I went on this crazy life journey and got very far away from coaching, and then have found my way full circle back. So we may even talk a bit about that, but didn't realize at the time, at such a young age, I kind of found the thing that I love. But anyway,
that's really funny, and I love that. I mean, I think that probably if we were honest with ourselves, those passions that perhaps didn't even seem like major things in our teens actually are really the passions that almost become part of our character. I have a similar story with actually advertising, but I understand that completely. And I can see how coaching is now really pushing you forward, and you've developed Clarity. So tell me more about the journey with Clarity.
Well, I think ultimately, as I say, you find the thing, but then you have all these expectations on you. I think when we're younger, around education, you'll go to university, and you know, going to uni in the UK, it's really more about having a core vocation than being a specialist. And so yeah, I went through uni process, and as I came out of university, with so many people, I'm definitely showing my age here, in the UK, there was a huge recession. So I kind of came out and fell into a job on Fleet Street, after majoring in kind of coastal management and geographical science at university, fell into advertising in Fleet Street. And the kind of lowest layer of advertising is, if you like, direct advertising. But it was a job, you know, that's kind of what we did. But I did weave my way, and, you know, I was on Fleet Street, so I felt like I kind of made it. But I kind of weaved my way and realized that from a kind of young age that I was really good at seeing trends and spotting connections for people. So I moved quite quickly. I was a data planner, and then moved into communication planner in sort of big global media agencies. But there was a problem for me, I think, in my 20s. It was very like kind of work hard, play hard. London is an amazing city to be in. But I guess I didn't really know how to operate in a way that was sustainable. I found myself working incredibly long hours. It was really, really competitive. And you're smiling away, Ben. I think you probably understand this dynamic, you know.
Look, it was an era where, especially if you worked in the media and marketing advertising space, there was really no switching off. I mean, if you had a pitch going on, all-nighters were common. right? I mean,
Yeah.
people were always working. You're absolutely right. It was very hard when people talk about these ideas of balance. It was very hard to even envision what that could possibly be, right? So
Yeah, and I would, to your point, I would regularly find myself pitching, or I'd be there on my 13th hour of a day tapping away, but there was nothing going on. Like, we are actually human beings. We're not meant to be always on, but you were revered for operating in that way until one day I literally had worked all weekend and probably also partied in it as well, done a really late night, raced into a pitch, hadn't skipped breakfast because that's what you do, came back out of the pitch and just kind of started shaking. And ultimately, longer story there, but I thought I was having a heart attack. So I promptly, crawled into a little ball under my desk in front of 100 peers and told them to call an ambulance. And I really genuinely felt I was dying in that moment, and I had to be physically removed. And, so I realized that day that you can't keep operating in that way, right? Your body will stop you. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack, but it was a huge stress-induced panic attack due to absolutely getting to burnout. And so for me, I broke my mind, and physically I was broken. So it was my first experience with really a shattering, experience. I was out of work for a couple of months. I couldn't be around people and loud noises, like all sorts of things. And I was really confused because everyone else was operating in this way. But that was really the first point where I went, there's something wrong with the way that I'm doing work. And I removed myself, had some time out. I ultimately moved to Australia for a more cruisy life. But before you know it, I was back in advertising. I took, would you believe, the lowest level in the least money because I was fearful of overworking. But before you know it, you've got those rituals and routines and behaviors, and you know how to get results, but at a cost to your health. And so fast forward a couple of years, probably into my early 30s, I was running one of the first social media and content businesses here, talking to CMOs about social media. They're like, what is this thing? Like it was a really interesting and creative time. But again, I was hugely overworking and hitting burnout. And at that point, I went, do you know what? I need to get a handle on what is ultimately driving this behavior underneath me. And so I started working with a coach myself and going deeper and, going back through all of the things that were really causing me to drive myself to burnout. And I loved the process. Obviously, I started to heal through that process. And ultimately, I went off to have a career change and work at a health retreat and retrain as a coach myself. And I never thought I'd come back into the business world, right? You kind of make it your enemy when you're on a big transition. But ultimately, I really missed the business world and started to go, what if, what I experienced, so many people were experiencing in the corporate space, this sense of absolute burnout, working to the bone, sacrificing everything. I ejected myself out and kind of resolved and retrained as a coach and healed. But I started to realize what I was learning here really needed to actually come into the business world. And I think it was the work of Raj Sisodia in Conscious Capitalism that really started to build the bridge for me to go, hang on a minute, like there are businesses that genuinely want to support their people and create sustainable businesses of the future. And they need, they really need support in terms of helping their leaders and their teams to be well so that they can do that work in innovative thinking. So my work, I started to realize, okay, I've got to bring everything I'm learning back into the corporate workplace. And that's where the seeds of clarity were kind of born. I'd been spending all this time helping big brands like Coca-Cola and Nestle and Kellogg's get clear on how to build a healthy brand and, ultimately how to build that brand positioning. And so I kind of realized I could start working with leaders to have them really reconnect with a sense of purpose and positioning and what was authentically them. And I could really sort of do some good here, like bring what I'm in, do some good, help leaders really start to understand how to lead authentically and with purpose and with energy and passion. So that's where it all started. I was kind of known as the stress and burnout coach. It's ironic that you teach what you know. So I kind of came back in and started working with execs, particularly in creative businesses, and helping them work with burnout. So that's where the seeds kind of started. I might pause there, Ben.
I love it. I mean, no, it's a great kind of genesis for a business. And I think that you probably, picked it there was a topic, there was a challenge that you faced, you saw the problem. It's essentially major societal problem, something that impacts all work. And the great thing is, as we were speaking before the show, I think it's the first time I'd have to say that business is open to the message and really kind of embracing it little by little, but more every day. Tell me a little bit more, though, maybe in specificity, where Clarity comes in on this stuff and how you work with businesses.
Yeah, and then so the origin was really actually a kind of full circle moment back into the world that we were just talking about before of WPP, and coming in as then their wellbeing partner to actually work with their people leads within that business to actually create them a foundation of well-being across their whole organization. They had really started to connect the dots between the fact that we cannot do our best work and be our best selves and be creative if we are not healthy. So there was a really amazing leader there that had come up through the businesses and ultimately could see that there was this crunch point and that everyone was exhausted and burnt out, and that we really needed to build a platform to train and upskill. I mean, there's 5,000 people in that business, but fundamentally, she had the vision and the foresight to say, right, how can we create fundamental change in this organization and make that a point of difference for us? And so we often work in partnership with our clients to kind of do that. So we will build a people strategy, in this case around well-being, specifically, and we built a raft of programs that has actually run for 6 years now. So I think we built a leadership level wellbeing program, which was completely unheard of, and we had that whole executive team of STW, as was then now WPP, go through that. We realized you have to create change from the top, and you have to start the conversation from the top. We built an open to all program, and importantly, we built an ambassador program. So we actually trained and developed 1 or 2 wellbeing ambassadors within every company. So 64 companies make up the conglomerate over here. So rather than us just going in and training individuals around self-leadership, how do we get a sense of what lights us up? How do we challenge our thinking around overworking? And actually, work out the things that light us up and the things that are draining us, and then reorientated our days and weeks to do that. So not only were we kind of training in that, we wanted to upskill wellbeing ambassadors in the business so they had the capability to continue the conversation after we've gone. So the only way you're going to create systemic change in an organization is if you've got people grassroots from within really supporting it, and of course leaders really advocating and understanding it themselves. And I think we were talking about this, Ben, you're really trying to break down some of this conditioning that you have, particularly at a senior level, around what it took to get ahead. So we were having a conversation really at that senior level of what would it take to balance employee well-being with client demands and and still maintain revenue, right? We were having really serious conversations at the top level around what would it take for us to really have a conversation with our clients to say, we're going to be better if you support our people to be, training in this way and working in this way. So it was a really exciting time. And then fundamentally, so we still do a bit of wellbeing and resilience training, but the business started to morph into this space of, okay, really the conversation needs to happen at the highest, level in order to change systems. So that's where really the Luminous Leader program was born in the last 2 years, really kind of at the start of COVID, if you like, which was really around how do we continue to support people in this crazy environment that we're in? How do we keep the conversation going? And how do we light people up from the inside out? And the metaphor, I guess I use here, Ban, the kind of old world was, we were talking about well-being, and it's like, light yourself up, energize yourself as a leader so you can give more to your teams and the business and others, but that's not actually sustainable. So really the thinking through COVID was a new paradigm shift, really around how do we teach and train leaders to light themselves up and then coach and inspire others to light themselves up. It's like a candle. If we light our own flame, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. So it's this thought of the only way we're going to create environments where people can thrive and be lit up is starting with leaders, starting with them role modeling a different way of being in business, a way that inspires and encourages people to figure out what energizes them as well. And so we've got this nice buoyant way of doing business and having leaders boldly lead organizations into the future, given all of the challenges that, you know, we've experienced in the last couple of years. We're dealing with constant change and evolution. And so I think it takes a new way, a new skill set for us as leaders to actually, you know, to do that and to operate in a different way. I think we were talking about before, Bant, somebody in your team saying to you, actually, you know, I'm most energized at this time of the day, so let's create at that time of the day. But, you know, fundamentally, I'm exhausted at the end of the day, so let's do monkey work. Let's not try and come up with our best ideas. So we were really starting this conversation now around what does it take to do that? What does it take to work in a hybrid workplace and still engage our teams? So the Luminous Leader was kind of born at the executive level, and then an emerging leader level program. So I was working with lots of executives, and they had these big visions and missions coming through, but they really need their team to be supported to help them deliver on that. So yeah, the Luminous Leader program was launched as an online program. It runs across company and within companies, and importantly, it runs remotely. So what I also observed, you know, throughout COVID, as you would have felt, Bant, in your business, is people becoming increasingly isolated and siloed and disconnected and really needing community. So I had a thought at the start of COVID, we've got to build something that really has people feel not alone. I was having all of these one-on-one coaching conversations around the challenges, the isolation, the burnout, because we could be on 24/7 working. And I felt that these conversations needed to be had as a collective. So really, that's where the essence of our business started to change, out of big wholesale programs and into really working with executive and emerging leaders, but in a community environment, building community to have these conversations, to find this empathy and support from others, to realize that you're not alone. And it just kind of, you know, has taken off from there, you know, in terms of where we now sit as a business, really trying to illuminate leaders.
I love what you're saying, Claire, and I completely can see that the journey and the process that you've been able to take organizations on. It's been fascinating to see this discussion really kind of springing out of COVID, the pandemic, about the future of work. And you know, you have these camps, some very prominent executives like Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO chairman of JP Morgan, saying, you know, gotta get them back in the office. Yes. You know, it's gonna destroy young people if they're not working in the office. And then you have other companies saying the absolute opposite. For me, it was quite an interesting moment because we certainly went to almost completely virtual, and now have developed a more what we call a U-led system, really let people decide how they want to work in our new model. But there was no data for my business that showed it was better to have people in the office. There was no data. There was data that sometimes they wanted to be together, and we certainly facilitated that. But there was no data that the business was less efficient or less effective in a virtual structure. And for me, in fact, if anything, it was actually the opposite, because we found people suddenly had more time. If they were spending an hour and a half commuting, suddenly the new structures allowed them to maybe take their kid to a certain thing here or there, maybe be home and have a conversation that was needed to be had with their partner. It seemed to be more human. And so for me, I'm always like, if people like Diamond can say these things, that's fine, but show me the data. Like, show me the data that actually states that it's more efficient for these people to be in the office. Show me the data that your bank is less effective as a bank because you've actually had to go to these hybrid structures. I don't see it right now.
No.
So,
and I think there was just a piece that really trashing Elon Musk, I guess, who isn't at the moment, who mandated people coming back in, and you have a mass exodus, right? So we know people are moving around.
But I mean, I'm a little cynical on that particular one, because what certainly has happened there is something much more sinister, which is
true.
they were using the forcing of people back to the office to force layoffs, right? To have people quit so they wouldn't get, severance, right? It was a nasty tactic, right? It was a tactic. I mean, look, Elon Musk would know, most of the best developers in the world have been working at home for the last 25, 30 years. So it's not like hybrid and virtual is not new for anyone in the digital space.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the thought of the U-led system. All of my exec clients are grappling with this. Like, how do we get the right conditions to have our businesses perform and for people to be healthy? I do feel like that is coming into the consideration set, and I think it's smart to define, it's really smart to define ultimately what are our goals as a business and how are they best served. And there are moments when we need to be together for that. I mean, the minute I started coming back in and clients wanted live in-person events, it was nuts. People were bouncing off each other like you've never seen. And it's like they remembered what it is like for human connection. And I think that's the only watch out we have to be mindful of. Although generationally it's changing, the social isolation piece in terms of our feel-good hormones. And we are meant to be touchy-feely human beings. And
I agree. I mean, don't get me wrong. I certainly think that in-person has there's an element that's absolutely critical. I'm just not convinced it's sitting in an office or a cubicle every day, and so this thought that Joe or Susie have to be in the office sitting in their cubicle so the manager has a feeling of superiority over them, just absolutely insane. The idea that a brainstorming session is more effective in a cloistered office where one manager is dictating to the rest of the group what that new strategy is, that's not better, right? It's something I think a lot about because it's a really important topic. And until, I think one of the beauties of companies like yours is that you've been able to get people to think about that whole self more. And when you start to think about a whole self, then especially if we all agree that people and talent are the most important things for any company. I think we kind of have to face the facts and kind of understand the strengths and the limitations of human beings and actually freaking love it. Love that, embrace it, and figure out a way to make people, as you state. So, I mean, Claire, you talked a little bit about your journey through the pandemic and how that worked through. I'd just be curious to hear, what are the kind of topics now that are bubbling up as like the key trends that companies are really, really tackling right now?
I still think we're probably a little bit behind you in this market, I would say, if I can say that. We're absolutely still grappling with that hybrid working piece, how best to mandate to not mandate. So that is a constant topic. We have found significantly that people aren't coming back into the office, and we are definitely finding performance levels of the generations coming up who do want to be back, especially in the world I'm in the marketing space. Part of the beauty of it is connection and events and and so there's this real issue around obviously not learning through osmosis, because you have a generation, perhaps more our generation band, that has kids that does actually want to be a bit more self-led in terms of, I want to spend a bit more time at home, I'm not coming in every day. So this generational piece is a real kind of challenge that we're talking about consistently still. And I think we were touching upon it before. We've got this sort of generational divide, I guess, happening. And we've got, brilliant people kind of coming up that are prepared to challenge things and say, no, this isn't healthy, or this isn't going to have me do the best work. And they're challenging things, but yet you still have people, I guess, fundamentally of different generational ilk that aren't yet fully convinced by that. And unfortunately, a lot of these guys are just exiting. So the biggest, particularly in a market, over on the other side of the world, the biggest challenge is talent and retaining talent. And that's That's, in my world, that's a constant conversation. And that's why people are really investing in making their leaders kind of more brilliant, to actually get these dynamics, to be behaviorally flexible, to actually open the lines of communication up and boldly create change in organizations. So I would say that's primarily the conversation that I'm having. The other conversation really is this absolutely desire to be good to people. I think there's a reflection that the last 2.5 years, 3 years has cost people so much. They're still operating in a place of real, genuine survival mode, I would say. And so I'm increasingly being invited in to have this conversation around what would it take for us to really lead with energy. One of the businesses that we both know, Mindshare, I'm in with them in 2 weeks' time. I was in with them before Christmas with their executive team. They have a brand new position to deliver in market all around good growth and sustainable growth. And so I think this conversation around the only way we sustainable is to be healthy and thriving, right? And good growth is not at the cost of people and things. So fundamentally, I feel like that's a conversation that's really igniting a great brand, a new leader in there, bringing the global positioning into market. And so I think really, if we can build really strong people strategies to support the vision and the mission of businesses and really tie the two together, and go, right, well, this is a crucial component of you delivering on your broader business vision and mission. I think that's when we get real traction. I think that's when we're going to get genuine you-led systems happening. And my secret wish behind the scenes, Bant, is I'm just trying to get to or in our business, we're just trying to get to those leaders that want to be good to people, that find it really purposeful to build legacies for people, and create positive impact. I could be working in many different sectors, in the social sector, whatever that might be, but I personally think big business is going to change things for the good for people. And I think COVID was the wake-up call that has accelerated that. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, Bant, but that's the stuff. Those are the conversations I'm having at the moment.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I mean, here we are, Claire, at the beginning of a new year, just entered February here. Tell me a little bit about what you see on the docket for 2023.
We are already essentially filling up a lot of our emerging leader programs, because again, I think you've got these brilliant, bright minds, but the crucial component is they do need to learn to influence. You can't just kind of call it out and shout it out and expect people to be listening to you above, around, below, whatever that might be. So I think the crucial piece really, and we talk about building leaders that are emotionally intelligent and can have courageous conversations, but also can really lead with influence and get things done, whatever level you're at. So the docket for us looks like putting another 100 leaders through that program this year. Well, I'm also doing quite a bit of work for us at this executive team level, really to start to have the conversations that matter, to try and shift them back out of survival mode and into more thriving and luminous mode, and shift their companies and the support and the structure for their people back into that mode. There's a lot of work. It's been around for a long time, coming out of Harvard, the work around adaptive leadership as well, this thought that we no longer have these kind of periods where we have intense effort, and then the new idea pops into being, and then there's a release in tension and pressure in the way that we operate in business. I think we're in this state of flux, needing to learn how to adapt to what is coming at us as leaders. And so that is a key conversation around how we genuinely help leaders to do that, to deal with challenge and change. We were talking about it before, in terms of things like attention training and being able to support your mind mentally as leaders. We have way too many tabs open, but yet we're expected to walk into any room and add value. So I'm really working with leaders on how to become more mentally brilliant, how to actually lead with energy. So I'm having systemic conversations and leadership level conversations there. And that's really going to be my focus. I'm bringing a lot of my executive clients, my inner circle that I do a lot of one-on-one work. I'm actually bringing them together this year, because again, I think we've all been operating in our silos a little bit through COVID. And I think that our learning and growth accelerates when we're around brilliant minds. So as much as people love and accelerate their learning and get a lot out of the one-on-one coaching space, to me, that's still going to be important, but actually creating group environments to be able to have senior leaders and emerging leaders bounce ideas off each other to create the new, because we're in this period of genesis, right? We've had through the chaos, we're still in this kind of flux and chaos, but I think a lot of amazing innovation, sustainable workplace is going to come out of this period of time. And so for us as a business, it's really important to create sort of group-based conversations. That's coaching conversations and shared learning conversations, because I think people need to be back in that stimulation and back in that environment. It might be a bit different over there, Ben, but on the whole, I don't.
I certainly think that building those communities that support and develop together is absolutely critical. I mean, there have been some granddaddies in that space, like, there are networking groups like YPO and others that do great work, but it's a real miss in terms of all types of organization, all types of leaders. And certainly I can see how what you and Clarity are building with this idea of luminous leadership is going to be able to fill a gap. Claire, if someone wanted to learn more about what you and the team are doing at Clarity, where's the best place to find you?
At the website is the best place to find us, www.clarityinc.com. So I'm sure we'll share that. Also, please reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm having at Clare Robinson at LinkedIn. I'm having many of these conversations with the community in LinkedIn as well. So if this speaks to you, please seek that out and connect with me. I'm always getting DM'd and starting conversations. So absolutely, those would be the best platforms to kind of find me within. And if this speaks to you, I'd really love to start the conversation.
Well, I mean, Claire, what a joy to talk to you today. Thanks so much for fitting us in. I know you've been traveling a lot. We've been speaking with Clare Robinson. She is the founder and head coach at Clarety Coaching and Consulting. They partner with leaders and their organizations to enable them to develop workplaces where their people can thrive. And really, we're talking about a new mindset that is sweeping through organizations, really led by organizations like Clarity, where they can actually bring out the best of people, make sure that they structure a workforce and an organization that has well-being in mind and really is thinking about talent in a completely different way. Claire, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.